Happy Sunday, happy Sunday. Let's
Happy,
get a
happy
show on the road.
Sunday.
Let's see
Well,
here.
I think I'm still just as red again today.
Are you? Did you have fun in the sun?
Yeah, I went to the beach yesterday, but I don't know, it's just this app or this streaming platform. But whatever. Because I'm not this red in my videos.
I don't see you that red anyway, right? So it could be just the way it mirrors back for whatever reason.
Maybe. Okay, well anyway, that's
Yeah.
beside the point. That's form. Let's get to content. What are we going to talk about today, Constantine?
Yes. So some people may have seen the title or the ticker down below. I was just having a coaching session with one of my clients, and the power of curiosity and asking better questions came up. And when we talk about the power of curiosity and asking better questions, the way I look at it is not even about other people, it's about ourselves. So getting curious with what it is that we're feeling in that moment, what it is that we're thinking or believing in that moment, and then asking better questions. And what I mean by that is that I found myself in the past asking a lot of why questions. Why am I doing this? Why is this happening to me? Why am I feeling this way? So on and so forth. And if you look at why questions and the way I see it right now, I actually wrote a small article of this I'm going to publish on LinkedIn. But when you look at why questions, they really push you into a spot of judgment, for me at least, right? Self judgment. Like if I ask the question, why do I feel this way? It will likely prompt a reasoning, or sorry, defensive reasoning, or an introspective loop that doesn't lead to any resolution. And then it goes down the path of, if you ask why questions, it tends to lead you to rumination, which is something that I've struggled with big times in the past, right? It's a repetitive cycle of negative thinking as people get stuck in trying to find reasons for the feelings. And it's not really about finding a reason for the feeling, it's understanding it, feeling it, for me at least, understanding it, feeling it, seeing the root cause perhaps, and what type of feelings I might want to have instead. And if the answer is not immediately clear or what you would want to hear, that can cause issues as well, right? And then I go down to the last part of the why questions, which is the potential for self-blame. And that's something, again, I've struggled with a lot in the past, because when I ask the why question, it literally almost immediately implies that there's something wrong, that there's a mistake, there's a flaw, there's something that's happening within us. So feelings of guilt, not being good enough, self-blame, self-loathing, all those things come up. And what I've been able to do myself, and what I talk about this a lot these days, is the idea of reframing from why questions to what and how. Because for example, what questions, it's all about encouraging you to observe and describe your experience without immediately seeking to justify or explain or even quantify, good, bad, whatever. So if I say what is causing this feeling, it will prompt me to identify and acknowledge the factors or triggers associated with the emotional state. And I actually, and I talked about this offline for a second before, but it's also about fostering a state of mindfulness, because you're now in the present moment. What question gets you in the present? Why, for me at least, and what I'm seeing is why it takes you to the past and possibly the future. And then what brings me in the moment? What brings this up? Well, now I become more aware of the conditions or context that got me into this, well, that are right now for this response. And the last piece I will say on this, it also opens you up for exploration, allowing you to have a better understanding of your experiences. That's what I found for myself. Like, what is this showing for me leads to insights about my underlying needs or unmet expectations, let's say, or intentions, without falling into self-criticism. And if you look at, wrapping this up really quick, this approach is usually used with things like CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, or even mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy, and has some success. But it's all about getting curious and asking better questions. So I kind of answer the question, Ashley, in a bit of a long-winded way, but that's my view on it and how I've been approaching my life, and it's been helping a lot. I'm curious to see your take.
Yeah, I mean, we both were kind of dealing with some technical difficulties. So I'm just going to share with everyone, we didn't really get an opportunity to kind of understand where each other sat in this theory and at first I was like, yeah, and agreeing with you until I realized, like, oh my gosh, that's not where I'm at anymore. why is the most powerful question I believe I hold now. And I've heard all the things you're saying, Constantine, and I greatly agree that sometimes there are periods and it is, CBT focused. But why is the most powerful question that I have my clients do? I have them go 7 whys deep. And to me, it's that
Really? Okay.
yeah, it's that shift. It's actually from, I want to say, crap. I will have to look this up, but some, you know, personal development book talks about going so many whys deep,
Yes.
and whatever. That's where it's acquainted to. But what I've found, first of all, the statement I always say is curiosity didn't kill the cat, it saved the cat.
Yes, of course.
I believe curiosity is kind of what got us here, but curiosity is the thing that can get us back out, right? You got to go back to the beginning in order to find the exit. So, what I feel why does is it takes back the ownership. And remember, I'm a firm believer we got ourselves here, and the only way to get ourselves out is radical self ownership and the ability to fully see that you are not an individual. And if you are not an individual, then nothing can happen to you. So there is nothing outside of you. So when you ask what, or you insinuate that this is something outside of me, is when you go down that spiral of separation. Why brings it back to the core center of why am I feeling this way? And then, but then the what questions, and that are like additional questions. So it's like, why am I feeling this way? And then you keep going deeper, but then it's like, what is the narrative? Like when you get to the why, then what is that narrative that is causing that why to come forward? Yeah, but I haven't really thought about the different kinds of questions I asked in a while. So I love that you brought this up, Constantine, because it's just kind of progressed to that way. And ultimately, for me, the ultimate why for me is the shame and guilt of the initial separation. But there's lots of layers of things over the top that are getting in the way, and I've got to sort through. But for me, why has been the most powerful. And I see Cassidy, she posted, and she was thinking the 7 whys deep as well. That has been such a powerful, like tool anytime I get stuck or a client gets stuck.
Let me ask you this. Okay, so let's actually dive into that. I love that. Now, 7 whys deep. I've heard about it. I've read into it in the past. Not something I practiced any recently. What I have found in my experience is that whenever I go down the path of asking why questions, it puts me in a loop, right? Because I mean, you can go 7 deep, but you can go a lot deeper than that. Because I have found that literally you can ask why to every single answer you get, so you can go as deep as you want. For me, at the state where I was in a while back, when I was going through this and making these decisions, it was a lot of self-judgment and a lot of self-criticism and self-loathing came up when I would ask the why question, to the point that it would deter me from being able to even go deeper. Asking to get to the 7th layer, right? Because I would ask the first one, is like, oh, let's take an actual concrete example. Why am I feeling bad? Right? And I'm using those words because that's exactly how it came up for me. Why am I feeling bad? Well, I'm feeling bad because so-and-so said something to me. Okay. Why am I feeling bad because so-and-so said something to me, right? And as I go deeper, and it still things.
It wouldn't be that you would stop with the why am I feeling bad, right? That's the key. So you already answered why I'm feeling bad. So you wouldn't add that to your next question.
Okay.
So the next question then, so why am I feeling bad? Then your answer was because so-and-so said something to me. Then the next question is, why does so-and-so saying something to me cause me to feel sad? See, you start to shift it, and we start to move away from that, like the darkness, the heaviness, because you're bringing all the pieces to the light, right? You can't, if you don't bring it to the light, that like the reality is, whether you ask the question or not, Constantine, you are sitting in a place of self-loathing. So either you bring it to the light or you ignore it and ask questions around it instead of allowing the darkness to come to the light. So that's what, and it's not comfortable, right? Like, don't get me wrong.
No,
And
no,
you are totally right. It can get you in a spiral. And I think that's why, it's really important to have a support, to have a mentor, to have someone like that, but to also know that there are moments in our life, and this is another, people are going to be pissed off, especially if they're in depressed places right now, where sometimes you just got to own that you don't want to get out of the shit. And that's a lot of times when you get in that thought loop, is because you want to be the victim. You want to sit in the pain. And oftentimes when you acknowledge that is when you can get out, because it's like, again, it's like life is happening to me. I'm in this spiral, this self-loathing. I can't get out. I'm getting deeper and deeper. And when you're usually in that, it's this like aha moment of like, crap, that's because I want to be here. But the second you realize you want to be there is the second you realize you can choose different. You can move
Of course.
out of it. So
And
do you see what I'm saying though with switching the question? Like, you're moving away from that. You don't keep just adding it on to the initial reason you went for the question, right? Is why am I feeling crappy?
No, I understand, absolutely. But then what questions could do the same thing but coming from more of a compassionate place? I'm really curious to see your take on the difference between why and what. Because the way you ask the question is like, why did so-and-so make me feel this way? I could ask the question differently and be like, what is it about my conversation with so-and-so that triggered this emotion? And for me, it comes from a less judgmental place and allows me to be in the moment versus being stuck in a loop in the past. And I mean, that's perhaps my own experience with it. But I'm really curious to see your take between the why and the what here, because I've seen it in my life and many people. It can have different triggers. You have different emotional responses to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a slippery slope. And of course, just like anything in the solution, there's so many possibilities that work better for some people and not for others. But I really think that what is a slippery slope of acknowledging something outside of yourself, right? A what is like, it has to be something separate in order for me to identify a what, if that makes sense. And I know Oprah did a whole book of like, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, which I love that shift, right? But I think, I don't know. I mean, this is like the first time I've actually got into this conversation, other than the realization for myself on my own journey, that why is the question that has got me the deepest. And it's the question that got me to the place where I no longer have questions, is the other thing. Curiosity has been my superpower to get to the place I am today. And the question why has been the strongest. And also, you'll notice though, like, why becomes the most polarizing question. And to me, I've found something that is the most polarizing or prickling, right? Like, think of parents, the 2-year-old that, like, they hate the terrible twos because it's the whys. The child is asking the whys. It's not asking what, it's not asking who, it's asking why. It wants a reason for this. And the reason why that frustrates us so much is because we don't have the reason. So it's better for us to just bypass it instead of acknowledging, hey, I've never taken the time to actually look deeper into this and to know. So right now you're reflecting to me my lack of knowledge. And that's what we do to ourselves, right? Because our self is outside of us, is within us, is everywhere. And I think that's why it becomes such a prickling, like, thing. And I'm a firm believer, if you feel that prickle anywhere, that means you got weight on it. And if you've got weight on it, then then it's holding on to something for you, right? That's why I say it doesn't really matter. I've found whys work best for me. It's what I work with my clients. I feel like it's the most self-ownership. But if you are adversarially sticking away from a question, then it's holding weight. So it's controlling you no matter if it works or not.
No, that's a great point. That's a very, very, very good point. My whole take, and I understand a bit more of how you've come to that conclusion, and I agree with you. I see exactly like you said. Everyone is different, and we can have different approaches. If you're in a darker space, where I found myself when I was going through this, why was prickling me a lot more than maybe it should, or maybe it was the right amount. And that would make me shy away from actually going deep enough and doing the work. And by reframing it to what, not necessarily to put it outside of me, and I'll
So
explain in a
give me an
second.
example. Give me an example of a why question that prickled you when you were going through this dark point, and then how you shifted it to what. I would love to hear that.
Well, this is something I'll have to think about because it's been a couple of years now. But let me sit with that, and I'll come back to you. But let me answer another part of what we were discussing. You said that what is creating the separation even further, right? Because it's something separate. And I want to dig into that a bit deeper. So let's take I have a list of questions that I came up with that I ask of myself more often now than not. And if we look, I'll take a couple. Let's see if one comes up here. What is the sensation I notice in my body? That's number 2 on my list. What am I feeling right now is number 1. What thoughts are passing through my mind? I'm not sure how this brings me up to separation, because I'm asking about myself. Like, what is the situation reminding me of? What need or desire is not being met? What does this emotion want to tell me? What would bring me peace or comfort in this moment? What can I learn from this experience? What is one small step I can take to address this feeling? What are the facts of the situation? How do they differ from my interpretation? So this is what I mean by what questions.
And like I said, it's a slippery slope, right? So a lot of the questions you shared are absolutely beautiful, but if we go near the questions, for example, one you said is, what is this emotion and what is it trying to tell me? Again, separate, right? Your emotion is separate from you and it's trying to tell you something. Do you see how it's that slippery slope of the what starts, it can shift something outside of you instead of something internal. But like I said, it can be used just as beautifully as why can, but again, slippery slope. I mean, I don't know how to explain it any more than
No, I
easy
get you.
Do you get what I'm saying? How easy it is to shift it outside.
Let's play a scenario here. Let's say this one. What does this emotion want to tell me? Let's shift it to a why question. How would you shift it to a why question? Now let's get deep. Let's get 7 layers deep here. So let's play the emotion. Okay, so let's say I have an emotion. This came up, let's say, a week ago for me, where I felt maybe a bit of imposter syndrome come up, even though I've been able to deal with that fairly well in the past. And I've been able to deal with it that time fairly quickly as well. But it came up, right, as a thought or belief, perhaps, triggered an emotion of maybe not being good enough. Okay? So how would I get curious here? Let's dive deep. Let's ask the first why question here.
So well, let me back the train up for a second. So you already know that you don't feel good enough, right? Or you don't feel like you're enough. But that's
in that moment. Yes, in that moment.
Okay. So is that what we're unpacking? Is that or the imposter syndrome?
No, okay, let's unpack. Well,
because you already kind of unpacked it. Do you see what I'm saying? You already unpacked it a little bit.
Yeah. But let's say, I mean, for someone listening, because it's imposter syndrome or stress or overwhelm, these are very common beliefs that come up for people.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Let's take one that's fairly common for someone to relate with, and then let's break that down using the 7 whys as you would do it.
Yeah. So, like, why do I feel like an imposter? And then you already came to your answer, right? Which is, say it.
So let's give one that's common that comes up to me a lot. So it comes to me from other people. It's like, I don't have enough experience to feel like I'm a master in this field.
Okay. So then why don't you have enough experience? Why don't you think you have enough experience?
Because I don't have the degrees or I don't have enough experience in the field. That's usually something that comes up. So let's say because I don't have the certification.
Okay. Why do you think you need to have the certification in order to be legit?
Because that's what society seems to be promoting.
Why do you believe society is promoting that?
Let's see. What would I say here? Because it's always been this way.
What?
Because it's always been this way.
Why has it always been that way? See, it's prickling you, but it's challenging you to understand. And the biggest piece you're realizing right now, Constantine, is there is no true narrative to support that for you. That's why you're getting upset. That's why you want to stop answering the questions, because you're living through someone else's narrative that you don't even have a true definition for it to make sense for you. That's how the 7 whys deep gets you. And I would like a 7 whys is like the standard, but I tell most of my clients, you go why until you like get to this point where it prickles you so much and you can't go anymore, because it's reminding you don't have a good reason. You don't. When you ask why, and that's why it's such an uncomfortable place, especially when you're in a dark place, right? Because it's going to tell you that your feelings right now are not valid. And that is the last thing you want to hear, especially from yourself. But that's where it takes you to, like, you have no valid background for this in this moment, if that makes sense. And that's why it feels uncomfortable. And that's why a lot of people feel like it puts you in a victim role, but it only puts you in the victim role if you choose to be in it. And most people are probably going to like hate this episode and hate Ashley because I'm like just airing it out. But really, that's the only way you get to that level. The deepest level of self-love and understanding is moving past those moments of wanting to be the victim. Man, there are so many times in the last week where I knew that I wanted to be in the victim, and I just had to look at it and I had to own it, and that was the only way I could get through it. But we do it constantly. And the 7 whys shows you at the deepest level that you really don't have a freaking explanation for why you feel that way. So it's invalid. So therefore, the liberating piece is, Constantine, you have everything you need to show up and be whatever it is that started this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that. That's beautiful. And so, okay, you deconstruct it, you get the 7 layers, you realize it has no legs to stand on. And then what?
And that's when you have awareness. And when you have awareness, you can choose different. And prior to doing the 7 whys, Constantine couldn't choose different because he thought that this narrative was true. And it what, like you literally said, because it's always been. That's a statement of it is what it is. That's a statement of dismissal and inability to have the backing to change something or to know different. So now you get to choose different. Now you know it doesn't have legs to stand on. Now you know you've made it up as something to hold you back. Do you choose to listen to that narrative that doesn't have legs, or do you choose to create a new one? And in that moment, you can create a new one. Whatever it is, like, whatever you want your new narrative to be, and you start living that. You start not acting, I hate that word. You start being true to it.
Being. I love that, Ashley. This is not the path I thought our conversation is going to go down, and I so love that we had such different views on this because it opened up such a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it challenges us both, I think, to really look at why we do certain things.
So, what does the question "how" come into play? Because that's another one. How is a big one on my list too. Well, what and how were in the past. So things like this, how did I come to feel this way? How does this belief influence my behavior or decisions? How can I support myself in this moment? And I can already, hear you say, oh, well, that keeps you separate as well, because I can see that. How can I approach this challenge differently? How do my body and mind react when I experience this emotion? Like something like that, right? How can I communicate my needs effectively? Those type of questions.
Yeah. I mean, when you say the word "how," it doesn't sit right with me. And to me, that's my intuition telling me it's another scapegoat word. So I honestly don't know if I can articulate with words right now why. All I know is, like, internally, how just immediately I felt like that's a cop-out. I don't know.
Interesting, because like the question that comes, we talked about this, I think. I'm not sure if we talked live. Might be important to go there. We talked about the idea of a lot of us are going like, oh, why is this happening to me, right? That's a why question. And then reframing that to how is this happening for me? So it's a how question. And then you said something beautiful last time we talked about this, and you're like, well, how about the third one, which is it how is this of me or like of my
No,
creation?
it wasn't even like how. It was life. It was more of a statement. It was life is happening of me instead of to me or for me. Because we weren't asking it in a question, I don't think. I think it was like
Oh, I was coming
life
from the
is
question, but okay. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we came up with a question for that, is what I'm saying. I think in the moment we were talking about like life is happening to me, life is happening for me. And then I was like, crap, I don't sit in either of those anymore. I really live life is happening of me, meaning of me. It just like we're one, it is of me. Like everything is of me. I am the one doing this. And when I say I'm referring to the I, like Alan Watts talks about, like who is the I, the mind, versus this body that's Ashley. It just so happens to be projecting out of that right now.
Interesting. So, but let me ask you this though, then, because the reason I have questions behind it is because let's say a challenge happens in our lives, and now we want to look at it and come from the place, like you said, this is happening of me, so of my creation, right? Co-creation. But I found
What?
that some people have to ask the question is, so you would say, why is this happening of my creation, I guess, as opposed to how is this happening of my creation?
Yeah, because how would it be? It would be like, why am I doing this? Why did why did I choose to have this situation occur?
Oh, powerful.
You
Yeah, I'm gonna
know?
have to reflect on this quite a bit tonight. This is really interesting. I love it.
Yeah, it's a lot of self own. I mean, to be honest, Constantine, where if we were having this conversation maybe even a few years ago, I may have been in a completely different place. So I want all the listeners to hear this is where I'm at in my journey. And this is a journey. And I am really in this place of full self acknowledgement in the big self and full understanding and radical ownership and release of individuality. And so it's really in that place of why, the deepest why. So that's why works the best for me. And then I'm a firm believer because when you stand in your authenticity, you attract the people to interact with and work with that are ready to hear that message. So my clients, you may be listening and be like, oh my gosh, she is like so polarizing. Why is awful? Because you might not be in that place where why is meant for you. But like my clients, they come and why is so powerful for them.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
but they only came to me because they were attracted to my light, because their light is like. Okay, that sounded funny. But do you get what I mean? Like, so if you're listening, you don't resonate and you're like, what? No, like, that's okay too. That's the cool thing. Like you said a little bit ago, if you put weight on a question, then that question is ruling you, period. It's not even giving you the opportunities that lies within. Like anything. Like Constantine could drink every single day and I never drink. If I sit and judge Constantine or he sits and judges me, then what we're actually doing doesn't matter either, because there's so much weight placed on the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything you said there because like you said, it's like we're at different stages of our journeys, and certain questions have worked a certain way, and maybe once you get ready, like I'm in a spot right now where I'm like, oh, now I need to dig deeper into this. I need to understand what Ashi really meant by why. I'm gonna get curious, and I know it's going to be uncomfortable because it gets uncomfortable when you ask
Mm-hmm.
deep questions. And even I get to certain points with that even when I ask what and how questions, right? So this will take it to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think you hinted at this. There's no right or wrong answer here, and that's the beauty of conversations like this and other podcasts and other content pieces like books and videos and whatnot. Is see what makes sense to you in the moment and be curious, because we're talking about the power of curiosity, right? Is get curious. Can this be good for me? Because right now, I'll be honest with you, Ashley, when the first time when you said, "Oh, you don't want to ask what and how questions, and you ask why questions," I felt attacked. I was like, shit, okay, what's going on
Yeah.
here? And then I got curious. I'm like, wait a second, let me actually get curious with this. Now, obviously, we're doing this live right now. I can just retreat in meditation and be like, let me sit with this. But that's exactly what I'll be doing after. I'll be like, okay, let me actually sit with this and ask some powerful questions and do some introspection. And then whatever answer comes up. That's the right answer in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well,
powerful.
because
So
I
sorry, go
think
ahead.
like ultimately, Constantine, like it's not about the form, it's about the content. So maybe whys work better for me, and when I articulate it, you get it, because maybe it happens to be that the content is the most powerful for me in the form of why, if that makes sense to people. Because form, we get so focused on form, and we've talked about this almost every single time. Form is effect. Form is not where the power lies. It's in the content. What is the behind it? What is the originator of it? What is within the mind? And then now you're seeing like the many after effects. So that's why it doesn't matter. That's why in the end, like, I can say peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and if I'm fully saying it in spirit, in the place of healing um and oneness, someone who is about to commit suicide can hear exactly what they needed to hear and no longer take their life. That's how powerful content is. But we get so freaking hung up on the form that we never find our way to the content, because form is the smoke and mirrors. Forms is like, I have this amazing guy I did a podcast with out of I think the UK, but he always talks about the frame. We get lost on the frame instead of seeing the picture, because the frame has all these jewels and beautiful things that we completely miss the picture. And that's what happens when we get so focused on form, on words, on looks, on anything at the level of form. So, but we still have
Very
to converse about it, right? Because this is what we get to do, is converse. But just don't put weight. You want to ask what? Great. You want to ask how? Great. It's your intention. And if you are intentionally using those to circumvent a discomfort that a different word offers you, that's where you got to go. You got to go to that word that is holding the discomfort, because that is keeping you stuck, right? That's why you're uncomfortable.
And speaking of that, let me ask you this, because this is what comes up for me, and what I came with this a lot in some of my coaching sessions as well. If, let's say, the why causes a discomfort, because it does, right? It puts you in that, and then it can trigger certain emotions and feelings and more thoughts and beliefs, and it stops you from making the progress you're hoping to make, because you're in a state where you can't seem to be able to prickle yourself too much and go down that path. So then if you ask what and how questions, let's say in this scenario, you can get a bit deeper. So it allows you to make more progress. Maybe it's an illusion, maybe not. But how do you feel about people that say, you know what, I cannot get very far with why, or with any type of question? And, it's just finding different ways to get to at least part of the solution, so then you can ask yourself deeper questions coming back.
Mm. I mean, I would, say you're choosing that. I would say that you're using that word as an excuse to not go deep personally, period. Um, because you can. You're blocking you. And that's what goes into like the radical self-realization, the radical ownership of it is one. And when you're saying that, you're blaming your lack of awareness on a word. Like, to me, that's like one of the like most obvious. I'm blaming something outside of myself, even though it's not a person, place, or thing. A word, when you're blaming, you're seeing it as separate from you. That word is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but most people are in the space though, right? Because I would imagine most people don't necessarily see it as everything being one, right? The oneness element, and things being separate, being the victim. So I'm looking at, okay, I'm using my logical mind here in a way, which might not be the right approach, but there are steps, right? I can't imagine a scenario in which someone that believes that everything is happening to them can immediately jump to thinking that, oh, you wait a second, this is of my creation. And I've tried that with some people, and it's like it's always
Oh yeah, no, you
not
can't. I
working,
mean,
right?
that's
So
not fair. It's not fair.
that's what I mean. It's like if you're at a stage where you're not there yet to understand that this is of your creation, or even in between stages, somewhere in there, like that probably some of these questions that prickle you and that stop any progress whatsoever might not be so conducive. Yeah, that's like you said, radical change happening, but most of us cannot do a radical change. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the spot we were to begin with.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what I just said about content versus form and where you're coming from. So, I mean, I'm sure there is, well, I know that there's times I use how questions. There's times I use what questions. Like, duh. I use when I show up with anyone, I try my not try. I'm working every day on untime from the ego, which means I'm working every day at being more a connect, like more remembering I'm the one. So I don't sit and think about how I'm going to ask a person a question. It's kind. I sent you a quote the other day, Constantine, about a healed mind does not plan. It waits for the plan to be shared and then it acts out the plan. Essentially is what that statement said I sent to you.
Okay.
And it goes the same. Like I just clear my vessel to be in spirit and allow spirit to speak through me, if that makes sense. So when you're in conversation with someone who is in that place, it's like this knowingness, this connection of how to meet them exactly where they are because I am them. So then it's not like I think, oh, this person can't handle a why question or a how question. It's just the question gets asked from a place of content, and no matter what the actual words are, it's received from a place of content.
Gotcha.
I'm like, you're like, okay, Ashley,
No,
whatever.
no, I'm looking at the chat here because we have a couple of things happening. But yes, no, I'm with you. I mean, I looked at the quote because I went up in the messages you sent. Right, the quote was: "A healed mind does not plan; it carries out the plans that it receives through listening to wisdom that is not its own."
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you say listening to wisdom that it's not its own, doesn't that imply separation?
So the where I took that quote from is from A Course in Miracles. And the Course in Miracles is written as a ladder in a way. So let's say at the beginning of the book, it's really written to you as the baby you are. It's like written to a baby of spirituality. So we don't talk to a baby the same way we
Okay.
talk to a grown adult, right? So as you move up the ladder of oneness, right? Like what you literally just use this example by saying, Ashley, not everyone thinks that way yet. So
Yeah,
how
yes,
can
yes,
you
yes.
communicate with them down here? So that quote is a quote that is someone who understands the oneness and it's the content behind it, but you're paying attention to the form, which is words, which all words are separation.
Yeah, this is beyond my pay grade. Still, I'm still.
Yeah. I think
I'm still doing a lot of
we're
work
venturing
here,
off into like areas where all of a sudden I'm going to say it just is because we're starting to get into the territory where words stop being able to fully explain what we're saying.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so let's get
So
back
back
to.
to questions because we're trying to talk about form and I'm trying to show you how content wraps into it, but also the conversation began with just a real focus on the use of form and how it helps some people a certain way versus a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the power of curiosity. I mean, of course, we've been talking about this all along. I'm curious, how does this show up for you right now in your life at the stage you're at?
I mean, I think it's like everything. Um, I think curiosity is just it helps you unwind the mind. It helps you not no longer have a wandering mind. It becomes a disciplined mind because again earlier when we did the 7 wide deep and it prickled because you didn't have awareness in that area. So let's just pretend like it's like a hidden place way back in the closet we haven't looked in a long time. So curiosity allows you to go to all those hidden corners within yourself and truly get to know yourself at the deepest level and understand at the deepest level.
Yeah,
Isn't like I think that is one of your main superpowers.
it is. It is absolutely. And it's, I'll be honest, it's not something I did enough in the past before starting this journey, and getting curious with, why am I feeling this way? What am I feeling? How is this of my creation, for example? And again, the words can be interchanged depending on what the person is. Has helped me a lot, because all of a sudden sensations in your body can be telling you things. All of a sudden feelings you're feeling or emotions you're having can take you on deeper paths to understand yourself. I mean, I'll give you an example. This still blows my mind to this day. I was at I think I told you part of this actually, but I was at the spa. And for those not knowing, I love to go to these Nordic spas that have
Love
saunas
it.
and hot tubs and cold plunges. It's been a month now, actually, but yeah, I need to go
Oh my
back.
gosh, you went like 3 times last month.
No, I went once in January, once in February.
Okay.
But anyway, so I like the hot tubs, the saunas. The cold plunge always scares me, like always scares me. And I was like, in the past, meaning every year other than the last few months, I would be like, no, I'm just gonna put my toes in the water, and as soon as the cold hits, I would turn around and go back in the hot tub. And I was there, yeah, middle of February, very cold in Canada, as you can imagine, probably around, it was probably 0 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit at best. So I'm enjoying myself in the hot tub, and I know I want to go into the cold plunge because I know the benefits of it. And it's also, I've realized more recently for myself, is that if something scares me, that's a sign for me to get curious, for me to actually go and see why it scares me.
Why? See, you're using why, Constantine, in some of the most powerful times.
Well, I am using it because you got me thinking about it more right now, right? In that
Okay.
moment, I was asking more of what questions and how, but I did ask some why, right? For me, it's a mix
Mhm.
right now because I'm at a different stage now. So I'm in the hot tub, getting ready to go to the cold plunge. So first I have to get out of the hot tub, and it's windy and cold, like 0 degrees outside. Obviously, I'm only in a bathing suit, so it's chilly. Walk over to the cold plunge, and the water in the cold plunge is probably, I don't know. I don't want to say it's not freezing, right? So it's above, maybe 35 degrees. And before I get out, I get curious, and I ask these questions, a set of why, what, and how questions. I don't remember exactly what I asked, and something started to feel different in my body. There was a pain that came up, and I got curious with that. And that pain took me down a path of a vision forming. And the vision was of my mother holding me as a baby, walking on a dock somewhere in Romania. Over the dock was over a lake, and it was springtime, so it was fairly cold outside. And I guess the boards rotted over the winter, and a couple of them gave in, and my mom fell into the water with me as a baby. And literally in that moment, I could feel the fear of my mom and, I guess, my young self. And then it was like, huh, that's interesting. Because then it triggered the memory where my mother actually told me this story many, many years ago of this scenario happening. I haven't talked to her to actually find the details, but that immediately gave me a chance to be like, so then that might be why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling when it's cold water. Literally, I freeze when I about to go into cold water, put my toes in, and I turn around. So I got better understanding. I didn't do much with it. I got out of the water, went to the cold plunge. I was able to release that fear and go in, and I stayed longer than ever before. Other fears surfaced up, but that one that was holding me back the most wasn't there anymore because I got curious. Now, there's a lot more work for me to do in that area. I understand that. But just because I got curious, I was able to unpack that a bit more.
Because you brought awareness. Before you were just operating of like, oh, I'm going to just avoid cold water. It's uncomfortable. So let's just avoid, right? Like, why? Like, how we started this entire thing was why makes you uncomfortable. So you have created other techniques to avoid. I mean, that's literally the story of our life and everything. Think of it. Like, think of your entire day and you avoid things that are uncomfortable. Like, if you don't like onions, you don't cook with onions. If you don't like when it's hot out. You stay in air conditioning, or you don't live where it's hot. Like you're constantly avoiding, um, which is fine, right? Like I avoid too, of course. It's part of it. Like we purposely do. But it's the curiosity that brings back the power, so then you can choose. Like you got to choose. You're like, oh, this is one of the narratives playing. Do I want this narrative to hold me back, or do I want to choose a new narrative?
Yes, yes, I love that. And I mean, and that's been my big realization the last few months is like when something feels uncomfortable and I'm scared, that's a moment for me to get curious and go there. Like I'll be honest, I was in Orlando in Florida, what, back in January,
Yeah.
and that's part of a conference. And part of day two of the first conference I attended included a ticket to Universal Studios for the roller coasters and all that fun, right? And I haven't been on a roller coaster in probably 2 decades. I've never been a fan, always scared me. And I got there, and I was with a group of people, and they wanted to go on the scariest one of them all, apparently. And I was like, sure, I'll go. You know, I got curious with that fear, right? And I'm like, okay, why am I scared? I didn't really make much progress because I'm thinking back, I didn't actually get too curious. But I went on it, and at the end, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'll try one more time. It doesn't feel like it's for me. It's still there was some parts that I haven't unpacked yet, but it didn't trigger any sort of fear emotion like in the past. There was still some, but it didn't trigger any good feelings either. So I was like, well, it didn't feel good for me. Maybe it's not for me, right? And it's again to get curious. And I don't know. I've seen more of those come up, and I'll ask another one for you, Ashley. There was another thing I was talking to a friend of mine. This is probably 6 months ago now, and the idea of darkness retreats came up. So, for those not familiar, a darkness retreat is essentially, think of it as either a cave or a house where you get essentially locked into. I mean, you can get out if you want to, but let's say locked in. There's only a candle there. You blow out the candle, and as soon as you blow out the candle, it's pitch black. You cannot see anything. Some of them don't even have any sounds. You get brought food twice a day, but again, you cannot see anything. And you're in there for 3, 5, 7, or 11 days, depending on how extreme you want to go. And apparently, what tends to happen in these retreats is, of course, you're just there with your own thoughts and feelings and beliefs and everything else that comes up with no other distractions, nothing else. And you can have some pretty powerful spiritual experiences, like more powerful than certain psychedelics or plant medicines or even other types of trips like meditation or breath work.
Mm-hmm.
And when she brought up the darkness retreat in our conversation, immediately my reaction was like, oh, I could never do that. That's scary. And throughout the conversation, I got curious. I'm like, why does this scare me? And by the end of it, I was able to build enough excitement to be like, you know what? This is on my list. I'm going to go do that at one point. It still scares me, but curiosity allowed me to dive deeper and realize, you know what? This might be something for me to explore. Because the fear of sitting with your own thoughts for like days without any distraction, I mean, that scares the living bejesus out of me in a way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the curiosity is just like a powerful tool that you have, and I think it's really kind of like the why question brings radical ownership. Curiosity, because you're getting curious with yourself, I think is the biggest thing we're talking about here, is like getting curious at this deepest level within, but also not stopping until it feels complete. And that was decades. I mean, that's my I don't even know how many lifetimes of curiosity I've been doing, but I was a very curious child, and one of the things that stunted my curiosity was I was told, like, it was like on all my things, you talk too much, you ask too many questions. So I started to lock that up. And then when I got older, I almost got kicked out of a center because I asked too many questions. I got kicked out of DBT group, dialectical behavioral therapy group. They kicked me out because I was making it uncomfortable for the other participants because I was asking too many questions. Now, if we look back, there was a lot of probably ego, drive to those questions, you know, kind of like I'm gonna out question you in a way. I wasn't using my questioning so great, but I locked it up after that. And then I've refound my way back and found out the only reason why questions piss people off, if you're coming from love, right? Like if you're being vindictive or whatever and asking that question with the purpose of prickling someone, is because it causes them to look at something that they've never looked at before or that they don't want to look at.
Yes. And as you're sharing the story, I could resonate so much because that was me as a young child asking questions. I mean, I talk about this a lot, asking the question, you know, what's our purpose in this life, or why are we here on earth, right? I remember asking that question all the time and nobody having an answer for me. And you know, then being told not to ask questions like that. And I was the same in school. I would always be the one asking, why is this way? Like, why am I having to follow this, or why am I following this way when I don't agree with it, type thing. And it's actually interesting that perhaps the reason, a big reason as to why I moved away from why questions for a while, was because of these experiences we've had in life where it prickled people way too much. And then it's like, it's a defense mechanism. It's like, well, I want to be included. I want to feel included. So I'm not going to poke the bear, so to speak. That's actually a really interesting take.
Exactly. I mean, why I think is like the one of the brightest mirrors, if you think about like how, I don't know. I'm struggling with how for some reason of even really understanding that word right now. So we'll move on. But like, what, it feels like you can answer that with like a thing, you know, like a tangible thing. But why is like that is a. I mean, I'm not a guru on questions. If anyone watches this, there's probably like explanations of like what a why versus a what versus a how, like what the basis, you know, really words type stuff that explains to you like how this word interacts. Um, but what feels so external when I say it? I feel this like lack of ownership with what my response is going to be, if that makes sense. When it comes to diving deep. Now, if Constantine asked me what I like to eat, that's different. Right? I hope people understand when they're watching this. We're not talking about just normal conversation. We're talking about deep healing, right, Constantine? I mean, I think that's what
Yes,
we've been doing. Okay. Because people are
exactly.
going to be like, oh, you never use the words what or how? How do you learn anything? What, you know, how do you know what anybody wants to do? No, this is deep healing. But what feels like I don't have personal ownership? That's like the internal feeling I get when I answer it. Why is like, oh, I have to have a reason behind this. Like there has to be backing within in order for me to answer this. Or the vice versa, when I'm asked that question, oh, you want to know what the backing is. You want to know it, which means I first have to know it, which the majority of us don't know it.
Yeah. I mean,
Like, don't think we know it.
there's another question I ask myself a lot, and you just talked about reason and purpose. I do believe that everything has a reason and a purpose. I mean, not meaning that we don't have free will. That's a whole other conversation. But
Oh,
other
jeez.
that, right? There's a purpose and a reason this is happening, even if you feel it's happening to you, happening for you, or happening off you. And the question is, what is the reason, right? It's a what question to me. Now, it could be turned into a why question should you want to, but that's another one of those things that you just mentioned, right? It's like, how do you get the depth you want to get, or you need to get to, or you get to? It could be through why, it could be through what, it could be through how, it could be through a combination of those questions. But it's about getting curious and probing deeper and deeper the more uncomfortable you get. I guess that's the bottom line of this, right? And how you get there might be different for you than it is for me or for you, Ashley.
It's like the intention. And then, you know, getting curious if a certain way of asking questions prickles you. I think that's the biggest lesson here from this conversation is like, it doesn't matter what word you use, but if you are using a word for a certain reason of avoiding another word, then there's a flashlight right there. There's an opportunity right there that whatever word you're avoiding is actually holding something over your head and holding some sort of weight. So instead of
Yes.
like circumventing it, it's like, how do I go break this up? Because like if you told me today, Constantine, Ashley, you can never ask another why question. I'd be like, man, that's like when I tried using the F word when I started making videos. If you watch some of my beginning videos, there's lots of cuss words, and then I've done much better. I will eventually get it, but that's like my main form of like communication, but it's not going to kill me, right? I'm like, okay, yeah, this is going to be uncomfortable, but I'll get through it. Meaning I didn't have weight on why.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the whole powerful thing that we talked about today. It's about getting curious when something feels uncomfortable, painful, fearful, whatever the case might be. And however you get to that other side of it, it's perfect for you at that stage in life, right? And then of course you can change stages shift, right? Because now, for example, you got me thinking about this quite a bit. I'm going to meditate on it. I'm going to probably bring more whys into my life, but I know that what and how has been serving me so far. But perhaps it's not the question or the questions I need to get myself to the next level, right? And that's how I feel the power of coaching comes in, and conversations like this, because you coach the people you work with in a specific way, because like you said, they are at the stage where they need to ask more why questions. The people that I end up working with is, to me, and that's something I'm going to reflect on, maybe that they are at the stage where what and how questions will get them a bit further ahead, and then why can come back right after.
Yeah. I think we all shift too. I mean, that's a reminder too, that when you sometimes hit an area, like you said, that's difficult in a certain question. I mean, how could piss you off? What could piss you off? Like, it doesn't matter. It's just you're using it as an excuse. But it's okay to try different, but also you need to be aware, like, oh, that's an area I want to revisit, but maybe in the moment you're not feeling it. Maybe you're not strong enough. Maybe, you feel that your path needs to be different. Just listen to your own internal voice.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
We have a great question here from Andy in the chat. So I'm going to, let's see if I can, I'm going to put this on the screen. Let me see. It's the first time I'm trying to do this. So bear with me for a second.
Hi, Andy. I don't know you, but.
So.
Oh, wow.
Right. So isn't it great to feel comfortable in your own skin and just not be curious about these things that make you afraid? I'm 54 years old. I bungee jumped. I did bike cross. I swam in a dam. And then the next part is, but today I feel like I just want to live in the best and the best way would be to stop challenging myself. That's a powerful question. Wow. I love that. Ashley, maybe I'll pass this over to you because I have no idea how to answer that right now. I'll let it simmer a bit. Let me bring the first part back up on the screen.
So this, Andy, I greatly appreciate this statement, and I think it is so beautiful, and I resonate with it. Let me see the beginning again, because there was something I wanted to touch on there.
Sorry, let me put it back on the screen.
Isn't it great to feel comfortable in your own skin and just not be curious about those things that make you afraid? So what I hear is you feel a call to being. And what I have found for myself, I think I do a video on this, but think of people who do extreme sports or extreme things. They say they feel the most alive when they are doing them. That is because they believe they can die. Okay, Constantin, this is a rabbit hole for sure. But you can't. You are not a body, but you feel most alive when you are doing something that you believe can possibly kill you. That is not living. That is dying because you believe you can die. To truly live is to truly be. And that's what I hear Andy saying is his stage is like, okay, I've done these and I've found that even in those moments of feeling most what people would say alive, I didn't feel that. And now I just want to live and be. I mean, that's what I'm hearing in his statement, and I resonate with that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe Andy's saying something else. What do you see in his statement, Constantin?
Yeah, and Andy, feel free to jump in the chat and see if that resonates with you. What Ashley said.
Is he's talking on yours? I'm gonna move.
Yeah, on the Unleash Thyself YouTube. Yes. If you
Okay.
go to Ashley, on the right side of the restream, you have a chat button. If you have that opened up, you will be able to see all the chat from your YouTube, from mine, from
Okay.
Instagram. It will come up on the right. Do you see anything with chat on the right side?
Yeah, I
Anyway, I'll let
found
you
it.
take a look.
Okay,
Perfect.
keep going.
So let me break this down here. Isn't it great to feel comfortable in your own skin and just, to me, this is a matter of choice, right? I believe that where Andy is right now is a spot where he's aware that perhaps, there could be more that challenges him to go to the next level, but he makes a choice to be in the moment and enjoy life as it is because that's the stage he's at. And I think that's perfectly fine. Like I've always talked about this, the idea that we always have a choice in life. We are aware that we could be doing different things, but we choose not to. And I don't believe that there's a right or a wrong answer there. And if you're aware and you're okay with the choice to stay in the same spot, then perfect. Enjoy life and be in the spot. Because there are certain parts of me, for example, where I'm aware I can do better, I should do better according to someone else's definition. But for my definition, it's fine where I'm at. It could be around money, it could be around food, it could be around other things in life. And if I understand the question correctly, if you're at a stage in life where you're comfortable with where you are finding that peace, you're finding the joy, you're finding that fulfillment, then stay there, right? I mean, personally, I know that whenever I found a place that I thought was good for me, and I just got stuck in that space, it grew to not be joyful and fulfilling after a certain amount of time. And I look at this and compare it to nature. And nature, if you look at nature, when something stops growing, it pretty much starts dying. So I look at myself and I say, okay, well, if I get to a place where I'm not complacent, but like in a place where I feel finally in my spot, am I then just not growing anymore? Am I just being content with what I am? I don't know. That's a much deeper question. I know you, like you said, you could send us down a rabbit hole. I'm not sure if I answered anything. That's kind of what comes up for me there in the moment.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful question,
Yeah.
though. It's definitely one to get curious about, an introspective one.
Well, and I think this, like we always talk about, everybody's on their own journey here. And some of us will go deeper into the unlayering, some of us will go deeper into the actually adding layers. Like, I think we're all at different places, and it's honoring where you're at. And I think, like in personal development and in spirituality, there's a trap of where all of a sudden, if you're just like, I'm done. I had a friend one day and she's like, I'm just done with all this love and, self improvement and all this crap. And she lived in Austin, Texas. And you could feel the anger behind her saying it because she felt that she had to keep doing this in order to be worthy, right? But because that's the message we kind of give, is that you need to keep growing in order to be worthy, when in fact that's not the case. Like, I know a person, I'm not going to say who it is, and I offered up an opportunity for them to work with a really amazing coach. And they're like, I'm really okay with how miserable my life is. And I'm like, holy crap, that is massive awareness. That is more awareness than people on a spiritual or healing journey. Like, and to me, that is just as impactful as the awareness of continuing to grow. Okay, so Andy, he's responding. I'm just going to move to that quick. I'll read it.
Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
I just think the adrenaline I used to feel before was lost after the love of my life died in my arms, not sports related, and after going through all the stages of loss. I just wanted to live, and the best way to live was taking care of myself. And thank you both. Oh, first of all, I'm very sorry about your loss, Andy, and that absolutely had to have been a very hard journey for you. So much love your way and light. And yeah. You think the adrenaline you used to feel before was lost after the love of your life died. Hmm. I think that's such a deeper thing we could unpack of like what actually occurred, and what that loss and you witnessing it actually signified in your life and actually sparked remembrance. I have a Peaceful Warrior video that came out yesterday, which if you haven't watched that movie, Andy, I think you would really appreciate it, and you too, Constantine.
Okay.
Way of the Peaceful Warrior. But ultimately, we remember through experiencing. Teaching can't give you the same thing as experiencing, and then it sparks that remembrance. And what I'm hearing, I mean, I would love to have an actual conversation with you, is that there was some sort of remembrance sparked in that moment, but because we're so taught that we need to be doing, you may have felt that it was something bad, that it took something from you. Losing this person took your drive to do these things in life, when in fact it was maybe just sparking a remembrance of how to be a being, what the true purpose is here, which is to be an extension of love. I don't know. That's just my thoughts, and I greatly appreciate you sharing, Andy.
Yeah, that's a powerful one, actually. And I don't have anything else to add. I mean, I don't have anything to relate to that, and it's other than, of course, other types of relationships, disappearing and dying. But yeah, I don't know. The last part, the second part that he said there, right? The best way, I'll put it on the screen, the best way to live was taking care of myself. I mean, to me, that speaks volumes in the sense that a lot of us don't realize that we need to take care of ourselves at every stage of the way, because by taking care of ourselves is how we take care of everyone else. And that's something I did not know how to do, Ashley. And I'm sure you and I can talk about this next time, maybe in more depth. But self-care is something that no one taught me how to do growing up or in school or anywhere. No one actually even showed me the importance of it until I stumbled upon it. And with great mentors like yourself and others, I was able to realize the importance of actually, I mean, curiosity and what we're talking about today is essentially a great form of self-care, right?
I think it's the ultimate form of self-care, but yeah.
No, thank you, Andy, for those questions. Amazing stuff there. I know we've gone a bit over time here, Ashley. I want to thank you for this in-depth conversation. You got me now thinking quite a bit, and I know I'm going to have some beautiful meditation sessions on this and introspecting on the questions, and getting more curious. It's like, hey, why is this why question prickling me so much?
Yeah, I love it. And I think, again, just reminder everyone, even though we talked about the power of these different words and how it works for some and works for another, there is no right or wrong answer. What works for you, and just pay attention if you're placing weight on something. I mean, really, that's like your ultimate flashlight.
Yes, beautiful stuff, Ashley. Thank you, everyone, again for
Thank you, everyone.
So, Constantin Morun here from Unleash Thyself, and
Ashley Abramson from Big Miracle Energy.
Awesome. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.